What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back to Out to the Fingers. We're doing the full Gambale sequence. Yikes, there's some pretty evil transitions in this bad boy. But the reality of this exercise, if you will, is that it's designed to work on your focus. Let's put it that way. And what I mean by that is you have to basically start micromanaging. You're like, okay, I have to move from this position and play this shape, and then I have to move to this position and play this shape based off this, and blah, blah, blah. And that right there, just doing this process is sort of like a training platform that you would use. And so we're going to use the Gambale sequence. And it's because essentially I was messing around with it more the way he teaches it, but I couldn't get it to work. So then I started adding in a few notes, and I was like, you know, when you make a little loop with it, sort of more what he does with respect to the lick that slurped LA, it started to make more sense. So I'm going to show you all the basics. Obviously, we're going to talk about the arpeggio, how to create the compound arpeggio. Then we're going to go through each of the dedicated pairs, where I show you the tabs. And then, of course, we do a slow version of each of the two pairs together. And then at the end, I show you how to use it in a real world context as far as an improvisation is concerned. And we'll talk about some of the basic ideas that I use there with respect to synergy and all that. So, good times had by all. Let's get into it. All right, let's talk about modal coordinates. Essentially, we're working in the key of G major, right? So I use the set pattern essentially on one string to lay out the actual coordinates of the key that I'm working in, right? There's the 7th degree, Locrian, there's the 2nd, Dorian, there's the 4th, Lydian, there's the 5th, mixed Lydian, there's Aeolian, right? There's Phrygian, there's Ionian. Now I can use that information, right? If I'm like, this is the Ionian position, I can be like, I can do this major 7, but I can also do this minor 7. And there's a subtle difference between those two arpeggios, but essentially it makes a huge sort of amount of difference when you play them correctly over the right sort of harmony, and when you do it incorrectly, you'd be like, woof, you know, right idea, but wrong one. It was a 50-50 chance, and that's my point. You got to build up the experience to be like, do it now on this one, and then do it on this one when it's the other one, right? When it's major 7, do it on that sound. When it's minor 7, do it on this sound. And that becomes a big part of your guitar training of the ear, obviously. In this case, to essentially recognize different sounds, but it also starts from the idea that you're like, I'm at the Ionian position. You're like, oh, I'm moving up here. To the Phrygian position, you're like, I might use the scale. Right into an arpeggio. Into a triad. Right, so I think you're getting the idea here is this music sort of theory, right? The distances between the notes, the note names and stuff like that, the modal names, that has to be used in actual sort of practical application by breaking down the fretboard into regions. And I call that modal coordinates, where you see the 1st degree as the Ionian position, which is like, oh, I want to use a pentatonic scale or the major scale. Or the diminished 7th arpeggio. Right, so all of these ideas come from the idea, I'm like, oh, this is the 1st degree. Right, if I'm sticking to the obvious ones, you'll have about 10 choices to play just based around this one note in the Ionian position. And once you start to understand that, then obviously you have all these paintbrushes to paint with, and you have the same skill. Now listen, this is where the systems come in. We're going to look at just the gambales. So of course it's based around the idea that I'm like, oh look, I'm in the Ionian position. I want to do this gambale arpeggio. Now listen, it doesn't always work one for one like that, right? So that should be definitely something that people are aware of right now. You have to blend these arpeggios with the appropriate harmonic sound, and that obviously adds another element of surprise, if you will, and obviously skill. But step number one has to be obviously just the basic music theory, where you're taking the scale and breaking it out onto one string, and then of course sort of now understanding, oh, you're like, oh, there's the fifth degree, and I can do this pentatonic if I want to. Or maybe, again, that comes from the, yes, Lydian 3 notes per string. I just only did 2 on the low E string. And that is why you have to know these positions, so you can then be like, okay, I'm starting off in the Locrian position with this arpeggio here, which is just a small variation of, I've omitted a few notes in the Locrian position. So the real piece of information there is this 3 notes per string system, right? And then of course into Aeolian. But of course now, you know, I have this fragment done, moving into the next one. Again, this one here comes from, again, the Locrian position, 3rd inversion, major 7. In this case, G major 7. So that right there is as big a part of this lesson than just actually learning the sort of compound arpeggio. Think about where you are, so you can be like, okay, there's this chord going on here. I think I want to do it up here, starting at the 3rd degree, because I know the 3rd degree is complementary to the 1st degree, right? So you'd be like, okay, it's this one. Now, I imagine that would probably work out pretty awesome, right? And there it is. You're like, move to the appropriate position, then execute using the gambale arpeggio. But you might be like, oh, I'm going to do this dominant 7 variant, in this case the minor 7, or maybe the major 7, or maybe just a straight up minor triad. Right, so there's so many choices, but it all stems from the idea that you know that these root positions exist. Without that, you're basically hunting around the fretboards. When I'm like, move to the Phrygian position, you're like, we're playing in G major, move up to this note. If I'm like, move to the Locrian position, you're like, move to F sharp. If I'm like, move to the Mixolydian position, you're like, move to the note D. Yes, C is going to be Lydian. Music theory. Done. Let's get into the arpeggios. All right, let's talk about these compound arpeggios. Essentially, I'm starting off in the Locrian position here, right? So I'm doing 2, 3, and then 5, essentially on the low E string. Once I'm at 5 here, the note A, I'm going to play an A minor triad, like as a G type. I'm going to tack on this extra note here before sliding up a whole step, right? Now, listen, does it really matter what the arpeggio is? No. I see this as a minor 3rd interval, right? With the whole step slide. As far as the technique is concerned, it's down, up, down, 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 right? Anytime you have a series of strings that do the triad thing, which is why you're trying to make these triads, you're going to do, you know, these little mini sweeps. So if I have 3 notes on the low E string, right, it's down, up, then it's down, 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 up, and then of course I got more, right? So it's down, 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 up, down, up, right? If I keep talking, I'll just make an actual, you know, butchery of it, but the thing is that you have to sort of sit there and think to yourself, like, what is the most efficient? Obviously, you're going to come up with the same sequence I just did there too, but the point being is you have to actually sit there and think about it and be like, oh. Now notice this one, I slide up with my pinky, bar with my second finger so I can slide with my first finger. And then I bar with this finger so I can start again. Right, so you're trying to get that kind of vibe again, the dedicated pairs. If I were to do the next one with the Ionian position, jumping up into the minor triad again, and then another minor 7 on the way down. Right, so again, you're sort of going to see me do the dedicated pairs on their own, but the point being here is that you can now play them in small loops, right? You're sort of trying to control the string noise. That's sounding better now. The string still has to ring out. It's not just about completely muting it. It's about sort of really allowing the notes to ring out, but of course controlling it too. So the first is obviously working between the two shapes. You're like, okay, it's Locrian and Ionian to start with. You're sort of the first 3 notes, then this minor third, up a whole step. Then you're like a minor triad, whole step down, then a major 7, third inversion, open, barred, with the half step to get back up, right? Like that's how you have to basically break it down, or however you want to do it yourself. The next one would be like, oh, the first 3 notes from Ionian, and then it's again, minor triad, with the minor third, up another whole step to the minor triad. You're going to slide down the whole step, and then another minor 7. That's a major triad. Hear that? So being able to identify these sounds, absolutely crucial. Now, that's enough of the explanation, because there's only so much I can say about it. Master the positions, then start to see these shapes, and then start to tack them together one right after another. So you go from the 7th degree to the 1st degree to the 2nd degree to the 3rd degree, and so on and so forth, using the basic rules of music theory. And I think you'll be like, yes, kid, let's get on it. All right, with the improv stuff, just notice I keep all the major, the happy sounding stuff with the major stuff. So I practice enhancing that feeling when I'm practicing to major sounding backing tracks. And when I flop over to the minor ones, I do things that sort of enhance the minor flavors by adding in things like the harmonic minor and the diminished scales. So that's got to be job number one, is that you tailor your improvisation to the kind of sound that's actually playing as the backing track. If it's bluesy and stuff, you're going to want to blues it up a bit more with dominant 7 and diminished and the blues scale, right? If it's more fusiony, you're going to want to get into 3 notes per string, the minor pentatonic, and of course the melodic minor. And again, you can see how you need to start to select these elements to sort of tailor it to really maximize how awesome the improvisation is going to sound. Then, of course, you need to really concentrate on synergy. I'll talk about one section because I know people are going to ask about it. Essentially, I move to the Dorian position and I do the whole halftone scale, which is basically diminished as a symmetrical scale. Because I'm like, from here, it's the harmonic minor, right? And I'm like, that's a great example of synergy. The diminished scale into the harmonic minor. They have like their own flavor, but they complement each other a lot. So it's not the entire thing is just the harmonic minor, and it's not the entire thing is just the diminished. It's a bit of both. So you get like this interesting idea going up, and then it's kind of a little different on the way back. Very important, okay? And of course, you're starting to hear how I take things like the minor pentatonic scale and then mesh that up, if you will, with these sort of more expansive arpeggio sequences. But again, I'm only using the dedicated pairs just to keep it simple. I don't try to do the whole thing. I just grab one or the other, and that's just it. Initially, I keep the major ones with the major, and then when we get into the minor stuff, obviously I'm starting to shoot off into the minor territory while using this configuration right here, right? Right? 3 notes per string. Because it's in G major, right? So, the thing with the improvisations are that you have to sort of get comfortable with the idea of hearing the second arpeggio as being the thing that you're kind of resolving to. The first one can be a lot more spicy, as long as the second one that you go to, as far as what's playing as the backing track, actually sounds a lot more friendly with respect to the backing track itself. You know what I mean? So it's not about starting off with a really stable sound. It's about actually starting off with a more destabilized sound and migrating towards a more stable sound. That's how you use the gambale arpeggio, if you will, in this particular instance. And you can hear that it actually sounds pretty badass. And here's the thing, when you're doing the more majory ones, which I do, it has like this sort of in-between flavor. You're like, it's neither major nor minor. It sort of just really straddles the fence there. And again, very interesting. So the idea here is that you're going to combine these systems, right? You're like moving down here. You're like, okay, I can jump into the arpeggio right here, right now. See what I mean? I'm flip-flopping between a minor pentatonic, and then I insert the arpeggio, and then I'm back into the pentatonic again. I take those two elements and I combine them together to sort of create a balance. And I go in, I balance it out, and then I come back out. And normally, obviously, the second one would leave more room for you to sort of jump off and do what needs to get done, or you're just going to end your idea altogether. So we'll leave the improvs there. Check them out. Obviously, as far as the practicing stuff is concerned, just start off slow with just down, up, down, 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 up, down, 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 down. Now listen, if you want to do them all individually with your fingers, fine by me. But really work on also sort of the idea of sliding your finger sometimes once, possibly twice in a row. And of course, accuracy, just controlling the string noise. Right, and once you start doing that, you'd be like, okay, wow, there's a lot of extra little moves in there where I got to be like, okay, do a couple slides here and then get myself set up and do the whole sweeping sequence and where am I, the position, and okay, it's a major one here, there's minor, it's diminished, blah, blah, blah. And there it is. One of the best practice exercises I've come up with this year. Don't skip out on it. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate every single one of you. Enjoy the improvs, and we'll see you in the next one.